Well, welcome everybody. We are going to get started here. I'm just going to let people in as they come. But again, I just want to welcome you into the Big Texas Read. We have been doing this. I think Kendra Allen is our fourth author on the Big Texas Read. We started with David Samuel Levinson, who is a co-founder of the Big Texas Read. And normally Alexandra Vandekamp is on the Big Texas Read with us as well. She's a co-founder with Gemini Ink down in San Antonio, but she's in Rhode Island with her mother right now. So we're sending our love up to Rhode Island tonight. But my name is Blake Kimsey. You've probably gotten an email from me. I'm the executive director of Writing Workshops Dallas. And the Big Texas Read is a real collaboration across the state with all these great authors that we have that we get to feature with Gemini Ink down in San Antonio. And we've had some great sponsors. We mention Interrobang Books every time. They are this great independent bookstore up here in Dallas who've helped out by providing books. Also, the Twig Bookshop in San Antonio down there have been helping us out by providing our authors books. Also, the University of Texas San Antonio Library System has been helping us spread the word statewide, and we've really appreciated their help. And then, of course, we have Lone Star Literary. So if you go to Lone Star Literary, they just pretty much have every great literary event going on in the state. They're a great resource if you're looking for, new authors or events that are local to where you live, or even virtual events like the Big Texas Read. So I am going to introduce our moderator for the evening. Now I met Mark through Twitter. So if you are wondering if relationships can blossom over Twitter, this is proof positive. Mark's a great writer. He is the creator and writer of the Hidden Scribes and COVID-39 podcasts, which I'll put a link to COVID-39 in the chat window. Mark is a film screener for the Austin Film Festival and a contributing writer on CBR.com, where he tackles lofty global issues like, is this the moment for a Black Superman, and the diaspora of the Rick and Morty pantheon. Mark misses Dungeons and Dragons. Mark judges people who likes Signs, the movie, and he is solidly chicken on the which came first ideological spectrum. Mark is also the survivor of a recently rejected Netflix pitch. So that is our moderator this evening, and we are happy that he is here to moderate this discussion with Kendra Allen, who is the author of this brilliant essay collection, When You Learn the Alphabet, which won the which won the Iowa Prize for Literary Nonfiction from University of Iowa Press. Kendra is born and raised here in Dallas, Texas. She holds an MFA from the University of Alabama, and you can find her other work in Brevity, December, and The Rumpus. And her poetry collection, titled The Collection Plate, is forthcoming from Echo, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. So Kendra, thank you so much for being here. Mark, thank you so much for moderating this discussion. Before I hand it over to you, I just want to tell everybody, if you have a question during this, just put it in the chat. I'll make note of it, and then we'll cue it there at the end, okay? But thank you all for being here. And Mark, Kendra, welcome to the Big Texas Read.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Kendra, this is an amazing opportunity to talk to you. I've read your book within the last week, and on a personal level, it kept hitting me like in all these different spots that was just kind of violating. I was like, oh, stop, too much. But it was just amazing. Like there was a lot of similarities in our backgrounds that were just really touchstones for me. And like I lost my dad a month ago, and so like having those conversations as you're ruminating about death and like, how much time you have left, and being on the other side of that was just really just kind of like a hollowing out, in addition to like all the other smaller moments like struggling with dry skin and like all these other things that I just thought were like so specific, but in making those things universal were just amazing. So thank you very much for being here. Congratulations on the second book.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all those kind words. Rest in peace to your father, first of all.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you for sharing that. You didn't have to at all. Thank you. But yeah, I'm so happy to like be in conversation with you.
Awesome. First thing I wanted to ask you about that really kind of got me in a place where I was unresolved. I still am unresolved. I know you wrote this book 2 years ago about some of the issues that you bring up. In particular, you talked about in the essay, workshopping the N word. And I find myself wanting to be the best woke version of myself and trying to adopt those patterns. I have two young boys who are 4 and 1, and so they're not old enough yet for conversations about language in that regard. They're still figuring that part out. But like, I try to catch myself about what I'm saying around them all the time, and like, what kind of example do I want to be? And the word nigga just really, really has always kind of been. I mean, it's been my companion in the lexicon for so long. I can't imagine just divesting myself of it. But I'm constantly asking myself, should I? And I remember you were thinking about that out loud on paper and saying to yourself, like, you don't really know what the professor could have done. Like, how could he have made that a better experience? Or is it simply like a cut and dry situation where he should never have come close to the word? And so I'm curious now, and I know that in the book you describe how you kind of asked other people at the time, where they sat with it and so forth. But I confess that I still don't have a good answer for it. And I'm curious as to whether or not you feel like there was something he could have done in that moment with all the layers of like power and like instruction and all different things that were happening in that academic space, leaving aside all the social, things where, that's a different kind of conversation. But what could have happened in that situation? Is there any way to tame that word for our ears?
Ugh. Is there any way to tame that word for? Okay, I will say, like, I don't know. It's still unresolved for me as well. Like, to this day, the only thing that I know for sure is that he shouldn't have said it. Like, that's just what I know. But I don't know how to. I think it's something to be said about like the want to say it on white people's part that like we don't really dissect enough. Like, it's a urge or like a desire that I could feel from him all the time in class, where like he just wanted to say it, and he would go out of his way to read things that actually said it, or he would go out of his way to like assign text that said it. So I don't think it can be tamed for our ears ever. I don't think it should be substituted for ninja, or I don't even like white people saying Negro low key. I'm just like, what are you, like, yeah, I'm just like, what's going on? Like, yeah, I don't know. It's unresolved for me too. Like, that's a question I don't have an answer to. And I don't know how to tame it for our ears, but I feel like I shouldn't be the one to have to answer that question, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't even have an answer for that question. That's a great question, and you coming out the gate hard on me, and I feel violated.
Well, you were due. You were due.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know.
Well, I think you hit on something that's even more important though, and that's the conversation about what should be asked of you in these moments. We're having a racial reckoning in this country right now, and a lot of conversations are around allyship, which is part of kind of at the heart of the question. Because it's not so much will any of this work and advocacy get people to a place where, oh, we can all be kumbaya and niggering, together, like, black and brown and white, and feeling comfortable in that space, as much as it is about when you're dealing with something as entrenched in this country as racism, and you're dealing with all the apparatus. What is the plural of apparatus? All the different moving parts of racism. What is the responsibility of those people who are living and breathing it every day to not, I wouldn't say educate, but to, you've written a book, right? Like, you could say you've done your work in that regard. You've laid it all out. You've been very vulnerable. You've been very honest, and you've done your work in that regard. But for the average person who's walking around in their blackness, consumed by it as we are every day, how do you let people in, and where do you set those boundaries, and what does that look like? And so that initial question is kind of a foray into how do you let people be advocates for you in the spaces where you need them to be, and how much of that do you invest yourself in, give of yourself when you feel like you put in so much already?
I just kind of want to go back to something you said about like allyship, and I think it's like something very important to where if you want to align yourself as an ally to any marginalized community, if you can't, your allyship can't be dependent on whether or not that community is nice to you or not. And I think that's a lot of where the disconnect comes from when we talk about like race, and we talk about people who like just teach me, or I want to learn, or what should I read, or what should I do as a Black person, where is my position, but also as like a non-Black person, what is my position and what should I say to you as a Black person, that like where's the middle ground, if that makes sense. And you shouldn't expect Black people to be nice to you to get you through that situation. I think that's what my problem is a lot when I see I'm rambling. I'm about to start ranting, and I'm trying to like collect my thoughts in my head before I start ranting, and I talk for 5 minutes and nothing was said.
I love to hear a rant. I feel like that's content.
That's my number one thing. You can't expect people don't have to be nice to you for you to be an ally. If you're truly an ally, whether you're being treated nicely, if Black people don't want to like inform you and they say go do the work yourself, that should be that. Like the onus shouldn't be on us. But also for Black people who is like for me, I need to say for me, I wrote this book and I don't feel like I did the work at all. I feel like I was like surface level. I wish I could rewrite a lot of this book if I'm actually being honest, because I didn't have the language, I didn't have the words that I wanted to say, I didn't have the theory that I kind of have now, or like the politics that I kind of have now. I didn't know how to put that in words when I was writing this book, and I wish I can go back because I don't feel like the work was done. But I listen to people, number one. I think you should listen to everybody. You should listen to people when they tell you things. It shouldn't be but when people tell you something. It shouldn't be any gaslighting going on when somebody tells you something. Yeah, that's a hard question too. The work for me is never done because I'm always learning more and I'm always listening. So I would never feel like, hey, I wrote this book and it talks about race a little bit, and like what else do you want me to say, because it's things all the time. Think about like Black trans people who are dying at like a constant rate that we never ever talk about. I wish I could go back and write about that more because I really do care about those issues. Because race is not racism, I should say. Racism, it's all a construct, but we live in it. So like racism is not just one-sided, if that makes sense. It's intersectional, and I wish my work is always trying to find the intersection, and until it's like never ending, really. Yeah, I don't know what I just said again, but yeah.
Well, no, I think you hit all the points I was trying to highlight, but I also think, you said that you would rewrite it today, and I think that well, at first I was wondering, like, did you mean like from a writing perspective? Because you feel like the agony and the painstaking meticulousness of every word. So I was like, nah, man, I don't think you should touch that. I think you should leave it alone. But like, as far as hitting on certain themes, I don't think that, any work that's written about any issue at any given time becomes obsolete 10 minutes after it's published. At the pace that the world goes, right? So yeah. I think anything you write is going to be a window into the time that you wrote it, right? Like nothing has to be the definitive work on X, because there's no such thing, because like you said, you're always going to be learning, right? So my question, I guess, was more so, and you answered it to a certain degree, not so much like addition by subtraction, but what kind of things you'd like to enhance, and what kind of things you would feel like would serve a place in what you wrote. I'm curious, is there anything specific about something that you wrote that you gotten either backlash about, that you regret having put in there? Because you were very vulnerable, you were very honest about lots of different things. Or is there anything that you want to talk about as far as your politics that you feel like outside of Black trans individuals that you feel like you want to mention?
when I say like I would want to rewrite, I mean from both like a content and like craft standpoint. Um, yeah, I haven't like really read the book maybe like once, or like if I'm doing readings, I'll read it again. But when I go back, I'm just like, Kendra, like, come on now, like you have an authoritative tone right here where you don't need to have one. You don't have any authority over what you're talking about. You can like possess more empathy here. You can rewrite the way, the structure, the form of this. It could have been way more fire. Like that's just me never being satisfied with myself though. But I've also got like nothing but love from this book. Like I can't believe the amount of love that I've got. People who just tell me like nice, kind things every day, and my body can't really handle it because I can't take compliments. I'm always like, you're great, and I'm like, no, but you're even better. Like I don't even know you, but like you're great. So that's just who I am as a person, and I'm never satisfied with anything that I do, and I really want to work on that as well because that's like messed up. But at the same time, I have received like backlash from like my family because of not like my family in general, but certain people in my family where they read something that they didn't want to read about themselves, or like they felt they were forced to like face something about themselves that they didn't want to face. And I can't really speak to that either because I've never seen myself written about in a book, so I don't know how they feel about it. So I can empathize with that 100%. But that would be where the most backlash came from. And then I was reading like a Goodreads review like a long time ago, and I got basically called an angry Black woman, but I was like, well, that's accurate to a certain extent. So I wasn't like that mad. But yeah, it hasn't really been any backlash that I haven't put on myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think you had a good disclaimer in the book as far as how you depict yourself and others that you've encountered, and you just kind of say like, as if none of this was my business. Mm-hmm. Right. And I thought that was important to kind of distinguish it, because it's a real quick line, but I think it automatically absolves you of anyone's impressions or indications of who they feel like they need to be, how they need to be represented in your life from your perspective. Mm-hmm. But going back to some of the structure, because, I think, you're a good example of what a perfectionist looks like, in the sense of like, you could look at what you wrote, what I just read, and feel like, oh, nah, that's trash. Nah, dude, no, let's like, nah, man, like, leave it alone. You gave it to the world, and now it's out there. So I'm glad you can't touch it no more. And like, fiddle, because it's really amazing as it is. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm not sure, I read the Kindle version. I'm not sure if in print, I'm assuming it's identical, but the choreography on the page, like something that I have no bandwidth for in my own right. Like I've never even considered doing anything but an indent and an enter and an indent and an enter. And so I will say though, there are times where I've seen it and I've thought, oh, this was executed really poorly. Like this did not help. It hurt the book. Mm-hmm. I won't even name the book, but one comes to mind that's really strong where it's like, oh my God, like it was the worst. And yours, I found it really interesting. I found myself doing like these little like crypto like mind games with myself, trying to figure out what does she mean here when she's doing it. Like, cause like in the first essay, there are no periods, right? There's no periods in anything. I'm like, what's she saying? What does that mean? There are no periods. And then like later on, like it's just like, it's just like blotted on the page in like a very specific way, but it's a different blotting than something else that comes up later. And so I'm just curious as to what is the intentionality behind that? Like, what should we decode it for me? What should we be taking from this? What missive are you sending us?
Okay. I do have an intention with everything I write. That's my disclaimer before I say what I'm about to say. Okay. But I promise you, it's not that deep. Like,
it could be as deep as I'm making it, I'm sure. But I gotta know, like, what is it?
The punctuation thing in that first essay, Dark Girls, was very intentional. Because I just didn't like how most things boil down to I don't like how it looks on the page. So periods, and I love commas. I can do commas all day, but sometimes like my thoughts in my head don't ever end in a period. So I don't I want that to transfer to the page as like swiftly and as clearly as possible. So that was my intention with that, because something is connecting if it's no punctuation.
Right.
Like something is connecting at some point. But even with but I'm also always thinking about rhythm. And another disclaimer, I think I'm a rapper in my head, so I'm always thinking about how to connect themes and double entendres and things like that. So I'm always thinking about that. And I think form and structure for me is really trying to build like a rhythmic pattern in my work.
Mm-hmm.
I always want rhythm is like my favorite word. And I'm always trying to like build rhythm in my work. And for me, sometimes punctuation takes away that rhythm. Sometimes sentences are too long or too short for me. Even when I read like books, I can love the book, but like if it's too much stopping, it's like why I can't watch football, because they stop too much. I'm just like, why do y'all keep stopping every 5 seconds? What's the point? I can't, like, it won't hold my attention like that. So and I also never ever want people to be bored when they read my work. And I always think of writing as like something I love and like a craft, but I also think of it as like entertaining. It should be entertaining, whatever you're reading, taking time to read to a certain extent, even if it's informative. You should have like a good time reading it. You don't want to read anything boring. I think for me, punctuation and playing with structure, playing with the tab mark. I'm the opposite of you. Like my mind is always no indentation, no I'm thinking of line break more than indentation. That's what I should say. So I think like we writers in general can like push more with how we write big chunks of text on the page, because I don't want to read all that sometimes. And that's me being lazy, but also like sometimes it's not necessary, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. As a matter of fact, it's like, I don't know if you've written any screenplays yet, but it's definitely like one of the things they tell you all the time, like, break up the page, equal parts white and black, blah, blah, blah.
I took a screenwriting class before, and he wrote like all my notes were like, where's the description? Like, you just too much dialogue, like you're talking too much. But I do want to get into writing screenplays. I want to learn more. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and I feel like that part of it you'd have down. Like no one would need to teach you that or workshop that with you. Like you'd have the spacing on the page, right? Whereas mine, I'm sure that every screenplay I send in is like, drudgery.
But you pitching to Netflix, so you good.
Rejected, but yes.
Look,
yes,
rejections count.
Yes, absolutely. I will take all the kudos for having the balls to do it, but yes, that is not an accolade as much as it is a survivorship.
It's an accolade. I'm writing Netflix rejected me.
Absolutely. You have a big piece in the book that talks about the Black feminist movement, or at least really does a lot of work in distinguishing it from the white feminist movement. And why does there need to be two? Why does there need to be, by virtue of circumstances, this delineation between them? And you do the same thing with Pride and Black Pride. And I'm wondering, we're in this really interesting moment right now where Cardi B, because at the time you wrote it, she wasn't quite what she is today.
Yeah.
And like, WAP is getting like, all of this amazing attention. Like politicians are actually spending time talking about it. And I find it to be a very curious thing. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means or what we should discern from that specifically. I don't know if it's because she's made herself politically adjacent, in how she's stepping through the world. But I'm curious, as that has taken on, this life of its own, and we find ourselves in this Black cultural movement, what you would say to the things you wrote then and where you see that today. Have you progressed in that? Have you regressed in that? Do you feel like it's been static in your journey? Like what would you be a commentary about that?
First, I just say that politicians are talking about it so much because they look amazing. They just don't want to say that they enjoyed this video, so they're trying to like they look amazing in that video. So that's my little thing on that. But I wouldn't say like my politic with that has really shifted much. I will say that the world has a problem when Black women specifically center their selves, when they center their own pleasure, when they center their own autonomy over their body. It's always like a big, huge issue. But the world also loves over sexualizing us. So it makes like make it make sense, in the words of Monique. Make it make sense.
Great moment, one time.
Yeah, like that blows my mind a lot. Where like you see us as nothing but sexual objects. Even in your critiques of us, even in the critiques of the WAP video, in the critiques of Black women making art in general, it's always oh, but why are you doing this? You hear a lot of men in particular saying they're tired of women rapping about their body and like their genitals and things like that. And I'm just like, bro, like, do y'all listen to rap music? Like, do y'all hear these? That's all these men talk about. So why is it a problem when they take ownership over it? And I think for Cardi in particular, it's because she comes from like a sex work background and people only see her that way because we demonize sex work, but we love sex as a culture. So make that make sense too. I don't know. But I think what I said in that essay in particular that you're talking about, I still love when women talk shit in their raps. That's like my favorite genre of music. I say that all the time. I want to hear that all the time. But I think the issue comes when men feel like they have to talk about it or like have an input on it. Most issues come when men feel like they have to have an input on something that has nothing to do with them at all. And I think that's with feminism. It's like this air that is the definition of it and what is perceived in society is not synonymous, and people don't really know how to have intersections with that. I'm talking about like intersectionalism all the time, and it's no intersection. It's black and white with feminism. It's either like you're a pure, clean version or like you're a sex worker, but you can't be both and you can't be anything in the middle. And when you don't have a gray area, when things are black and white, when things are good or evil, it's never going to be a common ground. Anything is never going to get resolved because most things exist in a gray area. So if we're talking about Cardi B, until people see her exist as a human in a gray area, she will always have problems. She can't say anything without having a problem. And that goes for Black women in general as well. You either see us as a victim or you either see us as like a trophy. And it's like no in between because you don't see us as human. Yeah.
And you mentioned in the book the line, where is it? Oh, in fact, my sexuality has been both the reason for my come up and my downfall, of my praise and my backlash. Could you expound on that personally for yourself? Like, 'cause especially in the publishing works, I didn't know if you were speaking more professionally. I got that sense, but could you just expound on what that meant to you specifically?
Yeah. It's either I grew up in like my great uncle's Southern Baptist church where like they preach women gotta wear stockings, women gotta be quiet, you gotta stand up when the pastor comes into the sanctuary. It's just like all this antiquated, like low-key adjacent to like bondage kind of rhetoric that's always going on. And it only applies to women, but at the same time I will see the men in the church like plotting on women, looking at women of who they could talk to, women who they find attractive and want to have sex with, but like we never speak to that. So it's like it's a lose-lose situation. If I'm very openly sexual, I'm a hoe, and like that's a loss in itself. And if I'm not, I'm like a prude or something else. So it's a lose-lose situation. And like it's that lack of middle ground. It's that lack of gray area where even me in the publishing world, that can go to like a marketing sense. Like you want to market me as like a Black woman writing about race and struggle and all these things, or you want to market me as like a Black woman who's the opposite of that spectrum, which is really not it's capitalism. I'm about to go into a capitalism rant, and that's not what you asked me. But yeah, that's what I mean by that. It's a lose-lose. Like, it doesn't matter what I do, so I'm gonna do what I want, and I'm gonna say what I want anyway, because you already have this idea of like, I'm one way. Yeah.
I remember specifically in you describing the relationships with your parents, and being put in that place where, you know, you felt like there was betrayal happening on all sides, and you had to be a party to it, and also the most adult person in the room in relationship to the issue. And it was one of the aspects that I was describing earlier, where I was like, well, I know what you mean there. Like, I lived that to a certain degree on the other side of it. And I'm curious about how you feel informed by that in your work, from the standpoint of, you know, there's a lot to be said about you grow up quicker as a Black woman in this country. You know, you're being asked to hold on to more and to shepherd more. And there's a really good, I think, long overdue conversation about how much Black women are being asked to burden, and how along with that burden is not necessarily a proportionate understanding of the fact that it's not easy. You know, a lot of times when you do something in grace, people on the outside feel like, oh, that was effortless. When it's just, no, I'm just used to carrying lots of shit. And so it might look more effortless to you, but I'm actually dealing with a lot. And so the vulnerabilities are not taken very seriously. And you've seen this have like real world effects. You know, you hear people talking about, you know, they go into to access medical care and they get worse outcomes because they're not taking it seriously because of this perceived toughness that they have. And you're balancing all of that with this really bright acknowledgement of your femininity. And I'm just curious as to growing up underneath those circumstances and being asked to shoulder that, what that balance looked like for you, and where you felt that came from.
I feel like that pressure to balance it came from myself. Even if I'm like a kid, it comes from myself, not all the way, but to a certain extent, of like what I see, the patterns in my family that I see, so I automatically internalize that, right? I'm automatically like, okay, this is like my role. Like, this is my role as like a little girl, and then this is gonna be my role as like a young adult, and it's gonna be my role as like a grown up. And I'm just gonna like follow this pattern of like burden. Is that a word? Burdenship? It's a word
Can
today.
be. Yes,
Okay,
right.
it's a word today. But like this pattern, it's exactly how you said. Like, when you hear people describe Black women, the word they use is strong all the time. And I'm like, bro, like, the Black women I know need help. The Black women I know are struggling. The Black women I know don't know how to ask for help. The Black women I know would give the shirt off their back to people who will never help them. So I think seeing that growing up with my mama, with my granny, with my aunties and things like that, I always was just like, nah, cuz not me. Like, something in my head clicked that it was like, I gotta like break a pattern, and like I have to have boundaries. And I think therapy taught me about boundaries 100%, that I could have boundaries. And I think a lot of times Black women don't know that they can have boundaries because they're born into like this servitude and like this service of the men around them, the children around them, and they don't know that they can say no. And they know that if they say no, somebody will suffer because they say no, and then guilt comes on you, and you just feel like really sad and really bad that like you could have helped, but like you didn't want to. But you have the right to say no. You have the right to not want to do it. And I think that situation with like my parents like taught me that for sure. I was like, I never want to like be in this position.
Right.
Yeah, I never ever want to like I would carry the burden for my mama as a kid for her to not feel it. And I know that she's carried burdens for somebody as a kid for somebody else to not feel it. So I'm just saying like this generational pattern. And yeah, and I was just like, nah, I don't want to like deal with that. I want to break that generational pattern, but it's like way easier said than done. Yeah. I don't know how to do it, but like I'm actively working to do it.
Right. I know that we're gonna let other people get in here, and I could do this with you all night. I'm not even like at a third of the way through my notes, but
I'm with you.
but one of the things I wanted to ask you about in the forum is that I think given this moment, the word patriotism is taking on a lot of different connotations, and you know, you are the daughter of two parents who have served. And there's this really powerful moment in the book where you talk about you come home and there's an American flag in the garage and you took it down and you put it underneath the car, right? And I really felt you in that moment. But I also feel, there's this whole conversation about leaving America, right? About, if X happens in November, I'm out, right? And like, while there's a part of me that can certainly feel the seduction of that, I feel obligated, like, to fight for this country because it's my country. I feel like I'm an American before I'm even Black in some ways, but I'm Black before I'm anything else. You know what I mean? Because an American Black is a very specific thing. And so, but none of my parents. So you imagining that some of that complexity exists within you as the daughter of two people who have served and two people who have lost as a result of it, who have suffered as a result of it and are still carrying the scars of it. You've paid a price that I haven't paid in that regard. And so I'm wondering for you what patriotism means to you. How would you define that for yourself? And as a follow-up, are your parents okay?
Yeah, I can't sit up here and lie and say patriotism means a lot to me at all. Like, it doesn't really mean anything to me at this point. I'm really like trying to imagine a world that's different than the world we're in, and patriotism has nothing to do with that world. It has nothing to do with the freedom that I'm searching for. You talked about leaving. I'm down with leaving everything. Leaving is my favorite thing to do. And I feel like if I'm leaving, I want to leave to go somewhere where I'm allowed to be free. And I don't really see that place in existence right now. So if I'm imagining a world of freedom, and if freedom is possible for me, patriotism can't really be a part of that, because we're just going to end up right back where we are today. And I think my parents kind of instilled that into me low key. They joined the military because they were leaving a situation that they didn't want to be in. But they also were not very, very cool with, like, they're not like the military people who have flags on their cars, or like, they're not like that. But my mom did have a flag in her garage one time. I did do that thing, and she started laughing, and she was like, "Girl, just put it up. It's decoration." And I was like, "What does it mean, though?" Like, but yeah, if I'm trying to imagine a world where freedom is possible and freedom can exist for me and people who look like me, freedom for everybody, not just freedom for me, but freedom for the world. Because I think we become okay with minimal freedom, and we start to think that like we should be grateful for it, when that's not gonna help us survive. Like, we're not gonna survive another round of who, like we won't survive that. But yeah, my parents, they're okay, they're fine, as can be. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
good. They don't. That's another thing, but that's like another conversation. Uh, their PTSD is not something that they took seriously
Hmm.
as a child.
Hmm.
It really was low key like a joke, if I'm being honest.
Hmm.
Like when it's time to hold my mama accountable for something, for instance, she's like, I got PTSD. So it'll be like a joke like
Right.
that. But I think the more I grew up and I started like dealing with mental health issues and started to take it seriously, I could have those conversations with them about how they're taking their own issues and how they deal with it, and if they deal with it at all. And I think me talking about boundaries so much, also one of my favorite words. Um, yeah, they're good. Yeah.
Good. Great. Well, like I said, I can I was told I should leave some time for other people to talk, and I want to be respectful of that. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this. You are not rid of me. I followed you on Twitter yesterday, so I'll be bothering you from hints to,
Cool.
to having more conversations in the future.
Same. I would love that. This was amazing.
Oh, good, good for me as well. So I'm so glad. Thank you so much for being here and being so open with everything that you had to say in your book and everything you had to say tonight. And just best to you. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Best to you.
Thank you.
Wow, this has been such a great conversation. I just want to open it up for people. If you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can ask Kendra a question. Or there's some up in the chat, which I'll scroll up there right now and ask those questions. But if you have a question for Kendra, feel free to do the little widget and raise your hand, or just put it in the chat. And I'm going to scroll up here. So Allison wants to know, Kendra, how old were you when you wrote the first drafts of these essays? Your words are so mature and wise. Also, did you feel any kind of weight lifted off your shoulders once you sent this book into the world?
Thank you. So I wrote the majority of it, like 90% of it in undergrad, like between the ages of 20, no, that's a lot, like 19 and 22. I want to say 19 and 22, I wrote like the bulk of this. And it wasn't on purpose. I'm struggling to write a book on purpose right now. I was just doing my homework at school. I was just doing my homework for my workshops. And I kept writing about the same thing. And it just ended up being a book. So yeah, 19 through like 22. And then I maybe wrote like one other essay when I was like 23. But did I feel a relief? I felt a relief that I accomplished a goal. I would say that, like, I accomplished a goal. I wrote something, and I wrote a book, and I wanted to be a writer, and I accomplished a goal. So I felt a relief for that. I didn't really feel a relief about what I wrote in the book. Like, I didn't feel any weight get lifted off of me. I actually felt like more weight. It was a lot of weight in the aftermath of like this book getting published. So I did not feel a relief. Yeah, I didn't. I just felt very heavy for a long time.
Well, Francis had a question, which is you kind of answered it, but I'm wondering, you're writing these essays for the workshop. And Francis asked in the chat, he says, were the essays written as discrete pieces and collected for this book? Or were they written with the intention of collecting them? So at what point in your undergrad where you were getting encouragement did you realize that you could collect these, you could send them out for publication? Because, we do have a lot of writers also, tuning in for the Big Texas Read. So at what point, were you feeling that push to get your work out into the world, to find your readership, and to kind of take ownership of your voice?
Mm-hmm. I think it was my second year of undergrad. I was going to class and I saw like a flyer by the elevator, and it was like essay competition. And I was like, okay, I just like submitted. I wasn't really thinking that. I didn't know anything about like the submission process. I didn't know that it take forever to hear back from somebody. I didn't know you might not hear back at all. I didn't know what they would say. So yeah, I submitted to a contest. That was like my very first submission. And I was a finalist for it. I didn't win, but I was a finalist for it. And then like that finality, they sent like feedback, a little bit of feedback. They're like, this is good. You can work on this. This is different. They would say like affirming things like that. And that just gave me the push, like, keep going. Because I wasn't thinking I wanted to be a writer then. I just knew like I was getting my feet wet, and I was having fun writing. Like, it was really fun to write and go to my dorm and like write. I just knew that. And then like a year later, I was still writing about the same stuff. And I had a workshop instructor, well, professor, who's like a mentor. And she was telling me, hey, you know, like everything I wrote, she was like, you should send this here. She'll give me like different places to submit. And I was like, okay, but why? And she and I didn't know like you can get paid to do stuff. She was like, you should pitch this. I don't like pitching anything. I hate it. It's the worst. But like she would like give me information on that. And then when I graduated, I had like all this work, like all these essays. And I was one day at home just putting it together. And I was like, oh, this goes together. And then I saw another competition. It's kind of like it started how it ended. Like I saw a competition, and then I end up submitting into a competition. And that's how this book came to be.
Amazing. Wow. Well, you said rhythm is one of your favorite words, right? Or it is your favorite word.
It is.
One of mine too.
Yeah. So I can imagine the influences on the work come from all over, come from the page, come from the radio. So David asked, who influences you? Which writers or artists?
Yeah. I'm mostly influenced by music, like songwriters. I'm always like, that's my go-to. I love to read too. Writers, I love Kiese Layman. Probably was my first favorite writer, and I read like hundreds of writers before him, but I didn't have a favorite writer until like I read Kiese Layman. But I love Amy Winehouse. I love Amy Winehouse. Like I just read her lyrics sometimes, and I'm just like, bro, like come on, like the world just failed her. It makes me so sad when I think about it. But Amy Winehouse. I love Jamila Woods. Jamila Woods is fire. Black. I grew up loving Lil Wayne. That was like my go-to. Lil Wayne taught me about metaphor. I didn't learn metaphor in class. I didn't learn metaphor in English class. It was Dwayne Michael Carter, and I would be listening to Lil Wayne, like, how is he putting these words together? And that, I would say, like, listening to songwriters cultivated like my writing style, but like actually reading books taught me how to do story.
Okay.
She has a really dope acknowledgement section at the end of the book that includes like dozens of writers, dozens of hip hop artists, dozens of musicians. Like I made a playlist based off of the music suggestions that I'm gonna listen to later. And she also put me onto a lot of writers that I hadn't heard of or checked out before. Some of them were really similar to mine, but so for whoever asked that question, if you go to acknowledgements at the end of the book, like there's a really good list that you could just probably pull from as well.
I'm smiling so hard because that's like my goal in life is to get Spotify to hire me to make playlists. You said you did a playlist. Just, yes, thank you.
Yeah, it was cool.
Bajo asked, so in terms of like, so you're talking about your influences like from Lil Wayne and then from books and stuff. So where does the pagination come from? Like Mark asked a question about, you know, between the Kindle and the physical book, you know, like how, if it was the same, and I know from your conversation about punctuation, you know, Emmy Perez was our guest writer on the last Big Texas Read, and she's 2020 Texas Poet Laureate, and she was thinking about like just capitalization and how, and like the kind of the colonial nature of the capitalization, how it can take over the meaning of the word simply by capitalizing it. So when you're thinking about punctuation, can you also talk about the pagination?
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about songs again, like it's songs. I always think about songs. I never want to drag something out longer than it has to be. And I think I approach the page that way. Like when I'm done, I'm done. We finna move on. We finna press this space bar. We finna press this tab bar. We finna go to the next page. And I'm thinking about dominoes and like when I was young, My family would like play dominoes all the time. They had like powder on the table. It was so extra. You didn't need powder to play dominoes, but whatever. They would be playing, and when I was little, I used to think they were like building shapes. I didn't know what was going on. I just thought they were like building stuff. And when I learned how to play, I realized that, of course, that's not what's happening. It's actually math, and I don't want to do that either. I would, when I thought they were building things, I kind of think about that when I'm playing around with the page, how I can make it stand on its own, how I can make like a Lego block, kind of like that. And if like a sentence is all I need to say to like release a breath or like to stop the rhythm and like build on a new flow or something like that, that's what I'm gonna do. So that's how I think about it.
So was Sarah asked, you mentioned Lil Wayne, but was he your first favorite writer? Because he was teaching you metaphor. Like, who is your first favorite writer?
Dang, it might be Lil Wayne. Let me think 1 second. Lil Wayne was definitely my first favorite rapper. I would give him that 100%. He trash now. Like, not trash as a rapper, just like
I was about to say, how did he become trash?
Lil Wayne as a person.
No, got you. Whole other conversation. Got you.
Yes. But he was my first favorite. No, I take that back because I would be reading Lil Wayne, but I also would be reading like this is dumb, like B2K lyrics. Or like y'all might not even know who B2K is, but yeah, I would be doing that in conjunction with like Lil Wayne. So yeah, I would say Lil Wayne. I just didn't want to give Lil Wayne that, but I have to give him that. He was my first favorite writer.
Okay. Wait, was B2K Omarion? Was that who was it?
It was Omarion.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Didn't he try and peel off like Justin Timberlake? He was like, B2K.
They had this song called, it was like this bonus song on their second album called What You Get. If you can go on YouTube and listen to the song, I thought this was the greatest thing ever in life. But it's not that, it is good now, but it's not as great as I thought it was.
Okay. That just shows how we contain multitudes. You have
yeah.
Lil Wayne, B2K. Doing equal work.
Yeah.
That's great. Let's see here. Donovan has a question. He says, I'm curious what you define as allyship to be. It seems to be Donovan says it seems to be an abstract term that has different interpretations based on a person's identity, not some third person perspective of definition. I mean.
Allyship for me is like fickle, like it's hard for me to believe in people saying that they're an ally to Black people. And I'm not even being dramatic or like over-exaggerating, but you really have to be willing to die for me in order for me to believe that like you're a true ally. I don't want your allyship to end when like we're on the street and getting arrested. I don't want it to end there. You have to be willing to sacrifice your body over mine because that's what it's going to take for things to like stop. Yeah, that was very dramatic thing to say, but I really do feel like that.
Okay. Tamara says, you spoke about patriotism. For me, I consider the concept differently than others, mainly because I often feel as if I'm not viewed as an American. Does not feeling American play into your feelings about patriotism? If so, how much of an influence does that play into your writing?
Yeah, I'm not even sure if I feel American. That's a great question. And I think that confusion plays into my writing a lot of not knowing the ramifications of being American, being a Black American, being a Black woman American. Yeah, it plays into my writing a lot. The confusion of it does because I don't have the answers about how I actually feel about it. I just know that like this America that everybody seems to love and like revere is not the America that I live in and exist in. And I also think there's something to be said about who we put in powerful positions in America. And I don't think like America is honest about how what we're dealing with now in terms of like presidency is kind of what America deserves. I don't think America is is honest about all the things that built up to this and the role and the complicitness that is played into where we are now. I think we look over a lot of stuff, kind of like dysfunctional families. We look over a lot of stuff until it blows up and then we can't do anything about it. Yeah, and I think that confusion and that kind of fear and sadness that coexist in my mind about it comes out in my work more than anything.
Yeah. Okay. I want you to talk about Dallas a little bit. Like what like how you rep Dallas, what you think about Dallas, how it factors into your work, and maybe even the 2 books you're working on right now for Echo HarperCollins.
Yeah, I love Dallas. I think Dallas is like the greatest place. It taught me like literally everything. All the things I love are from Dallas, of course. All the things I'm thinking about, like Rudy's Chicken right now. So like Dallas is like home. I'm always thinking of Dallas. I'm always wanting to make Dallas proud. And like all the people I love, the most talented people I know are all from Dallas. So yeah, I always want to include it in my work. It wasn't as included as I would have liked in When You Learn the Alphabet, but I'm working on a childhood memoir that is like really just like a map of Dallas and where I grew up and where I went to school and streets and things like that. So yeah, I'm working on that. That's very, very hard because like I said, I don't know how to write a book on purpose. Anybody who's ever written a book on purpose, you're amazing. You deserve like $1 million just for doing that. It seems impossible sometimes. But yeah, I'm working on that. And then I just finished a poetry collection called The Collection Plate that's coming out next summer. And that's about just like my struggle with religion and Christianity and Southern Baptist churches. And yes, poetry collection on that, but it incorporates a lot of music, of course. Everything I probably ever will write will have some kind of musical element to it. So it incorporates music a lot. It incorporates, yeah, that's as well. And that comes out next summer.
Yeah.
Well, you know, just talking about how you write, you say, you know, like writing a book on purpose, and now you're under contract for these two books. And so Bethany, she submitted a question. She said, talk about how you write. Your writing feels as if you're a marathon underwater swimmer who comes up gasping for air from time to time only to plunge back in. So like, what does it look like for you? Are you listening to music while you write? Are you, what's the process? I love this idea that it feels like you're a marathon underwater swimmer who comes up gasping for air from time to time only to plunge back in.
Yes, that's a great metaphor. That kind of is low-key how it feels all the time. Yeah, if I can like paste that on my wall before I write, that would help me. Right now, I want to be a writer who can write with music. Like if I start listening to music, I'm not gonna write. Like that day is just over with. In my head, I think it's gonna help me, but when the music is on, I'm distracted. I'm not gonna do it. My process has really just been like, wait till everybody goes to sleep in my house and go in a room and pretend to write more than actually write. Like I have the Word doc open, and then I'll watch like a few interviews on YouTube. I need to be like pushed to write. But once I get into a flow, and that flow starts like 2 hours after I just sit at the desk, once I get into a flow, I'm in a good flow, and I'll be like, I could have wrote this in an hour, and it took me 7, just because I'm procrastinating. So my process is really like trial and error, and I have some good days, and I have some bad days, and I have some days where like I'm just like, this is trash. Whoever wants to do this for a living, like whoever wants to do this. But then like it's so worthwhile when like you feel that break in whatever you're writing. So yeah, my process is really just it might happen, it might not.
Yeah. So as you were talking, Liz, it sounds like a plea here. Like, what about just listening to sounds, nature?
Yes, that does help me. I have like an instrumental playlist where I just like instrumental and I can write to that, but I just don't. It's like a self-sabotaging thing. Yeah.
All right, we got a question here from David. Are you gonna write a novel? Or poetry, nonfiction?
I would love to. I just don't know how. I feel like I'm scared of fiction. I feel like I can do dialogue very well. I would be good at that in the novel. But it's everything else, like the world building. And I'm kind of getting a glimpse into it with writing a memoir, because you have to know how to do some sort of like plot with a memoir. And I'm kind of learning it. I want to build my way up to that. I really want to try. So yeah.
All right. So, Mark, do you have any other questions? Do any of our audience members have any more questions here?
I mean, I could go all day. I mean, don't get me started. I got questions. I mean, I don't want to, but yeah, I mean, I could definitely talk to Kendra on that about all kinds of things.
All right. Well,
actually, before you let me off the hook, specifically what you said about religion, I thought was interesting. Also, as it appears in the book, because there is so I'm an atheist, and I say that as a clarification point because I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to pigeonhole you into a response by any means. But what you said earlier about how there was like all the shaming that was happening for you, and you felt like it was specific to women in the culture in which you were brought up in that, and it's complicated for you now is something that you've revealed. I guess my question in regards to that is what is do you feel like the relationship with God is complicated, or the relationship with the church is complicated?
Yeah, that's a great question. I 100% feel like the relationship with church is complicated. I don't really go to church now at all. Since I've been on my own, I don't really go because of all the stuff that I know about the church. I know like whatever it is that they taught me, it's not what they're practicing in the church. So yes, I definitely have conflict with the church. And sometimes I have conflict with what God represents to the church, if that makes sense. Because sometimes it feels like the people in the church want to play God sometimes when it's convenient. I know that like I believe, but I don't know but I know I'm not who they say I have to be in order to be loved, if that makes sense.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But are you in what you just said though, does that make your relationship with God complicated in the sense that if God is this thing that I've been taught they are, mm-hmm. then am I aligned with that? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, is that how you feel? You feel like, or are you past that? Or you feel like, well, they're just probably wrong, mm-hmm. and God isn't that way, or like, where does that sit with you?
Yeah, I think at first I was that way, where like I had confusion about it, but now it's just like, so nobody knows what they're talking about. Not even just them. Nobody knows what they're talking about. I feel like I am becoming okay with who I am as like an adult more every single day, and like knowing myself and being like self-aware to where I can just take the bits and pieces that I want to take, which is what everybody does anyway. Right. Yeah, like that's literally what everybody does. But yeah, I think I'm still confused about it, because sometimes it's like because I've been raised there so long, I went there like 4 days a week for like my entire childhood until I was able to leave. And I think like because that's so trained and ingrained in my head that it's taken me a long time to unlearn it, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I'm like slowly unlearning it every day. Like I know I don't want to go to church. Like I know that, but I also don't know how I feel about I know I have like a relationship with the God that I've been trained to love and like believe in, but I don't know how much of it is separated from my mama and from me, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. I feel like I didn't answer that question, but
No,
yeah.
you did. I mean, you answered it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Baggio asked a follow-up. So, the complicated, thoughts about how you grew up. I mean, I grew up in the Baptist church too, and it scarred me. I mean, I went around for, gosh, a whole year when I was 5 to 6, just saying, I love God and Jesus, but I hate the devil. I love God and Jesus, but I hate the devil. And so I had that kind of complicated relationship too, but it just worms its way into my writing, because I can't detach it, culturally Christian from where I grew up. But Baggio wants to know, I guess, where was that? Yeah. So the role of spirituality, how does that play into your writing now?
Mm-hmm. I think it plays to my writing because I'm trying to figure it out. Like the collection plate is literally about me trying to figure out what role the spirituality played in my life through my writing. Yeah, I don't know. It's like I'm just figuring it out.
Yeah, sorting it out on the page.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what? I totally forgot to ask you to do a reading at the start. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
we can finish. It just slipped my mind. Do you have a favorite section that you'd like to read, or does an audience member want to make a suggestion where maybe we can do a reading to end the Big Texas Read tonight?
Yeah, I'm down. Anybody have anything they want to hear?
I got notes.
You would, Mark?
I see something in the chat about American marriages.
Yeah, 1718.
Okay.
Good call, Stacy.
Okay, I'll read these 2 pages. All right. So, if you haven't read this, all you need to know is that my daddy cheated on my mama. I knew, and he ended up. They didn't get divorced the whole time, and when they did get a divorce, he ended up marrying the woman. So that's all you need to know. All right. When my mama files for divorce, it feels like she not only divorces my daddy, but every once in a while, when the subject is brought up, it feels like she's divorced me too. She looks at me differently, like I'm guilty. Since I was a child, I've never not felt guilty. She hasn't forgiven me, so she likes to say things to me that make me cry. It'll come at the most random moments, but they come in swinging. I never said sorry. I later tell her I shouldn't have to. I was a kid, even if I had to be their parent. When I'm 20, when I've still not outgrown her resentment, I say I'm going to stay in Houston the whole month of July. My daddy lives in Houston. He's from Houston, so I will go there in the summer. He's know that too. She texts me, what for, but it's nothing I can do. When my father quietly remarries after a decade, he doesn't tell me. I find out at a family reunion as the rest of my family congratulates them. He tells me it just seemed like the next step. One night, after a week of tough encounters between the two of us, we finally have the first of multiple conversations to discuss the past that has never left my present. Like my mama, I work through things over long periods of time. When I tell him the deal, I think I'm 18 or 19, and he still is pretending to be blind as to why his old wife was so stuck on this particular woman. He thinks everything is about him. Says the reason he thinks my mama couldn't get he says the reason is that he thinks my mama couldn't get over him. I don't tell him she was stuck because of me, that she is stuck because our only child assisted in withholding information. And I quickly realized I am not talking to the man on that recording almost 20 years ago. I'm talking to the one who cannot disguise who he is. He tells me he don't know what her problem is because he had plenty of women. This was just the one my mama happened to find out about. He keeps adding on to the list of things I could never tell her. He says this to me with an expression of pride. He laughs his laugh, the same one from that video, except this time the laugh tells me he doesn't really care about women in a way where he can consider them past what he can take from them. When he tells me about these other women, I can't hold my voice. If I hold my tongue any longer, I will swallow it. I will become harsh. I lick my lips and prepare to get them ready to run through the finish line. I ask him, does he really think what he said is funny? I say it with such assurance that he knows what I really mean. I pray in closets to never get stuck with a man like you. I ask him, does he love his wife? I hope his answer is completely. She's a way better fit for him, patient and kind and other things the Bible says are important. He says she is teaching him how to love. I don't even ask what this means. If he ain't learned by now, why did he waste so many people's time? Why did I waste all my energy? Why did I lose all my trust for this? He says, ain't nobody asked me to do all that. He don't care. All he cares about is how I'm making his new wife feels. He tells me she thinks I don't like her. I think he makes this up just to change the subject. I've done nothing but be respectful and nice to her all these years. If it's been anyone I've been mean to, it's been him. But this is the relationship he would like to mend. I don't ask the real question, what about you? Do you think what you're doing, what you've done makes me like you? But I don't know how to say it. I don't think my saying that or this would matter. I do not believe in marriage. I do not believe in men. I do not believe in him. I cannot forgive him for making me hurt my mama too. Whatever I do manage to not say in that moment makes him answer my unasked question. He starts to cry. He says he wishes that I liked him. I tell him I love him. I hug him with one arm. My mama has always called me the child of half-truths. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Kendra. Thank you so much for reading. Stacy, thank you for that suggestion. Thank you all for being here. Mark, thank you for your great questions. Thank you for moderating. Kendra, I just love your book. I'm so happy to get to know you and to get to read your work. And I'm excited that we get to do it again on September 2nd, where we'll have, I'm sure, new questions, new discussions. And so I want to paste a few links here for you. The first is Mark's narrative podcast. It's called COVID-39. Mark has been miraculously writing, producing this podcast since we've been under lockdown. So I would encourage you all to download it. You can get it wherever podcasts are. Right, Mark?
Thank you for the plug. Appreciate it.
Yep,
Yes.
yep. And Kendra, I like to follow Kendra on Twitter. And so I'm posting her link right there, where I'm sure whenever the collection plate and your forthcoming memoir comes out from Echo HarperCollins, you'll find the news there, right?
Yes. Twitter before anything else.
Yeah.
Instagram, no.
Yeah. Twitter. Yeah. So follow her on. Oh, I sent those links to Mark privately. How about that for some? I sent Mark's podcast to him privately here.
And Mark is like, I know.
I've got the link. I've got the link, but thank you for being thorough. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Mark. Here's your podcast, and here's Kendra on Twitter. So thank you all for being here. We hope to see you again on September 2nd for another edition of the Big Texas Read. Mark, Kendra, thank you so much for a great night. We appreciate you so much.
Thank y'all so much. This was amazing.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Oh, Mark took off. And so did Kendra.